Okay, so we're going to look at the atypical cervical vertebra. And what we're looking at here is the first cervical vertebra, which is also known as the atlas. It doesn't really have an obvious body. If we look at its superior view, so we're looking down on C1, we can see that it has two lateral masses, two chunks of bone. You can see in green the articular facets that those lateral masses carry. And the lateral masses are joined anteriorly by a short anterior arch and posteriorly by a longer posterior arch. Now, if we look at the anterior arch and we turn the cervical vertebra number 1 all the way round, so I am now looking at the posterior aspect of the anterior arch, and you can see that it bears a circular articular facet, a rounded articular facet, which will articulate with the dens or the odontoid process of C2. And the odontoid process will project upwards from the body of C2 to articulate with that rounded articular facet on the posterior aspect of the anterior arch. If we come back and look at the anterior arch from the anterior aspect again, so that's exactly how it would look in the anatomical position, you can see right in the center of the anterior arch a blunt projection, and that is known as the anterior tubercle. Now, the posterior arch is longer and bears on its posterior aspect, so let's bring that around to its posterior aspect, it bears there a posterior tubercle, which represents the spinous process. Now, the lateral masses, we're looking down here on the superior aspect of C1. The lateral masses sit between the anterior and the posterior arches. And you can see in green, each of them has this kidney-shaped superior articular facet, which will articulate with the condyles of the occipital bone of the skull. Now we can see the transverse processes here, and they are long and arise by two routes, an anterior route from the side of the lateral mass, and a posterior route which arises from the posterior arch. The tips of the transverse processes are quite square, and the transverse process encloses the transverse foramen. And that's C1, or the atlas.